Whoa, is that a
Alright, it is 2 o'clock, so if we could have everyone's attention, Jonah's going to give us a nice talk on the Build a Judge workshop.
Yes! So, Build a Judge workshop. We're going to go to the first slide that you already saw.
Sorry, spoilers.
It's fine. I spent like 45 minutes learning how to use GIMP and make text go on a curve and then get the color right. Yeah. Did you know that there's a color picker and you don't have to like guess and check? Yeah. So I learned that. Learning is good. That's what we're here to talk about. I have notes. I'm going to talk a lot. I'm going to let you guys talk because I'd like to hear what you think. Some of you may or may not have experience, you know.
I can't speak English.
Or learning. So, why do I have you guys here? I'm here to have you guys hopefully learn how to mentor and certify new judges. This is going to go through the whole process from finding candidates towards teaching them, covering all the material, the tools that you have available to you, and then the actual steps through certification and what you do after. So we have some subtle copyright infringement here. Yeah, some people might be talking about more of the same right after this. It'll be great. But yeah, so learning is a two-way street. Feel free to ask questions, tell stories, particularly when I ask if I'm talking and I'm telling a story and you're not part of that story. If you're telling a story, that's not great. Anyways, so let's get started. Captain's job is simple. I'll be Captain Reynolds. You guys figure out who you are later. So, there are a couple simple steps that I like to follow. I want you to just find somebody, figure out how you like teaching, figure out how they like learning, figure out what styles work best for them, and then just do that and keep on doing that. There's no reason to ever stop mentoring. People might be like, yeah, I'm pretty much set. Like, somebody reaches out once, great. Have they finished learning yet? No. Yay! Audience participation, I love it. So, how do you mentor well? Part of it is being you. Just be yourself. Like,
can I be bears instead?
No, because you're not bears. And bears teach is different than you.
What if I'm a single bear?
That's different. You can be a single bear. Sweet. If you teach people by mauling them with massive claws, that's great for you, not so great for your candidates.
I gouge the comp rules into the skin of my...
That could work. Great. So, for me, I like cards that are metaphors, because they're just, so there's Captain Watch and Captain's Job, and then it helps the other soldiers, which are the tokens that you create. They're your candidates, and it's one big metaphor. It's amazing.
Can I use Captain's Claws?
Yes.
Captain's Call.
See, those are your metaphors. This is my metaphor. Although Captain's Call is good. So I like this sort of thing. This is how I teach. When I teach, I use card images that don't actually have anything to do with what I'm talking about and make them relevant. It's not particularly super useful all the time, but I like it, and so it's what I do. And because I'm having fun doing it, shockingly, the students that I'm working with are like, hey, this is actually interesting. I like this. So, before we get to that, the question that I want to ask that gets a little bit introspective is, why are you teaching? What do you want to get out of it? Because you do want to help your community. But for me, it's more than just wanting to help my community. And that sounds great until I tell you why. I want to do it to make myself feel better. Because I while I like seeing people learn, I also like being the person that helped them learn. And understanding that about myself helps me understand why I teach the way that I do, the actions that I take, which lets me accept feedback and grow personally, as well as learn how to teach better, if that makes sense to people. Teaching is fantastic. Seeing somebody learn, seeing something click in somebody's head is wonderful. With the rules of magic, they're so complex, and you can do really neat stuff with them. One of my favorite examples is multi-tail massacre. It would have been great if I developed these notes with cards before I put the presentation together, because then I could have the cards.
Can you talk about discarding Core Lash Air to Black Blade to its own Grandier ability?
You can do that. It's silly. We're not going to talk about that one, but it's neat. And you can exile multi-tail massacre from the graveyard if you sacrificed it as part of paying its cost when it started on the battlefield and ends up in exile. It's wonderful. Seeing somebody figure out how they can do that is great. Seeing that light bulb go off, I love that, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm teaching.
Isn't it technically that will go on?
Off, on, I don't know. Anyways, so you may be doing it for similar reasons. You might have reasons of your own. You might want to not be the only judge in your store. You might be running 6 events a week, and you're like, I'd like to go home and procrastinate now. And so you want to get somebody else in your environment helping you out so you can procrastinate more. You might be doing it because you get to have conversations about rules and you like that. You may be doing it to learn. One of the things that I started doing when I started running judge classes, which we'll get to in a minute, is I didn't know how triggers worked all that well. Like, I was real bad at them. And so when I had to teach people about how triggers work, before I could do that, I needed to know how triggers worked. And so I spent a lot of time studying them, and now I know them slightly better. I'm still not great. Anyways, we figured out the mentoring half, like the being you half. Let's get to getting a student. So, find somebody. There are lots of people who like magic. Lots of people who like magic who aren't judges. We can change that. We can have everybody be judges. Just
Not
players, classmates, colleagues, friends, players at large events sometimes are like, hey, you just, like, if you have a positive interaction with the player, they're like, I really enjoyed that. You made my event better. How can I become a judge? And while you may not be able to sit down with somebody who's normally on the other side of the country from you, you can give them some resources and be like, you'll be able to talk to your regional coordinator, who's this person, or if you know the area that they're from, you can talk to their area captain or area rep. In DC a couple weeks ago, I was approached by a player who was like, hey, I want to be a judge. What can I do? And I was like, so where are you from? Let's get started with that. And they ended up being from Boston. I was like, oh, your area rep is 10 feet over there. That's the guy who can help you become a judge. And so I talked with him for a bit, brought over his area rep, and was like, here you go. So talk to people. Get excited about magic. You're going to find people who are interested. However, not everyone can be a judge. Despite what I said earlier, not everybody's interested in being a judge. Not everybody's suitable for being a judge. Some people don't have the temperament for it. Some people just get very angry. And while you can work through issues like that, it can be difficult, especially if it's something that's, you know, a little bit deeper into their personality. While a lot of us are very good at giving and receiving feedback, it might be deeper issues that you have to deal with, and that might be too much for you. And it's not an issue that you should be worried about. Like, if somebody you don't think would make a positive influence on your local community, they don't have to become a judge. You can work with them, but it might not happen forever. Does that make sense? You're making faces. So that means you're, yeah, you, Mr. Jackson. That means you're thinking about something. Either that's a good thing, that's a bad thing, or it's a great thing.
I think thinking is good.
I agree.
I was thinking of some of my locals that I've had that interaction with.
Yeah, I've had to do that too. And when somebody comes up to you and says, I want to be a judge, and you're like, so last week there was an incident at a table that was transformed upside down. And you. That's not something that that's not the image we want to present. You're like, oh. So the next time they flip, they rotate 180 degrees. That's how flipping works. So you also want to not push too hard. I've had many, I love judging. Shock. I know. I'm here presenting on judging and I like it. I have a lot of friends who play Magic. They don't love judging because they haven't judged before and they're crazy. And I'm like, you should become a judge because they're knowledgeable, they're good around other people. I think they would be good judges. They're just not interested. And if I push them and I'm like, you should be a judge, you should be a judge, you should be a judge, and they become a judge, the instant I stop pushing, if it didn't click for them, they might continue to go through the motions, but they're not going to be as excited about it. They're not going to bring the passion that all of you who came out here for this event bring to your events, right? Does that make sense? So you don't want to push too hard because you might be their motivation, and as soon as you're not pushing them, they stop being the judge that they could be. Of course, you don't want to just leave them. You don't want to be like, yeah, you could be a judge, talk to me if you want to, whatever. Because then they're not going to care. If you don't care, they're not going to care. It's like a chemical equation where things balance out in that. I'm not sure, I didn't take chemistry ever, but I heard something along those lines. You can find out how much you should push somebody. There are lots of little ways to see how interested somebody is in becoming a judge. Say, have you taken your rules advisor test yet? They say yes, that's great news. They say no, you say, why don't you? And then they take it, and you see how well they do. And if they take it, you can see that they're willing to go out and do something on your recommendation that helps them improve. It shows that they're willing to take feedback and begin to grow. There are other things that you can figure out. Like if you don't take the RA test, I'm probably going to end up not testing you. If you've done nothing and I'm like, hey, do you want to take the RA test just to show me a baseline? And they're like, nah, I don't care that much. I'm like, great, you don't care that much. We're not going to continue this process. But I'll start off with something simple, like how do you take a turn? And if they say, well, you have the beginning phase and you start with untapping stuff, I'm like, great, I can work with you. They say, you have the beginning phase and you start with phasing stuff in, I'm like, great, I can work with you. If you ask about state-based actions, there are a couple state-based actions. Like the world enchant rule. Like either this is somebody you really want to work with, or the last time they played was 5th edition, and they don't know anything new. So talk to them. But if they care that much, bring them on board. So now that we have your candidate, figure out who they are. We figured out who we are, figured out why we're doing this. So let's look at them. Because we're going to be trying to provide feedback, right? And so we're going to want to figure out why they're doing this, what they can get out of it, and how we can improve things for them. Again, it's going to be armchair psychology. I don't know how many of us are actual psychologists. I don't think too many of us are. No, cool. So I got that right. But we can have educated guesses. We work a lot with people. A part of what we do is looking at players in situations where conflict has arisen and figuring out what they want and how we can make them happy, how we can de-escalate the situation and get things back to status quo. And so we understand, hopefully, to some degree, how people work, what people want, and I guess to put it in a Machiavellian way, how to manipulate people, and in the judge sense, how to manipulate people to make them better. And that sounds kind of terrible, but it's actually pretty good, because it helps them grow. So, yeah. I do think that most people start judging because they want something for themselves. A lot of people, myself included, are like, I want to help the community because it's great, and it is. However, I feel like a lot of us have personal reasons. For me, it was because I wanted to prove to myself that I could. I wanted to get up there and be like, I know this, I think I know this stuff. I want to prove to myself that I am as smart as I think I am. And knowing that and going to my mentor after, I figured out it wasn't a short process. He was able to be like, oh, that's why you're doing stuff? Great. Now I know how to tailor feedback to you. Since I know what makes you tick, I know how to encourage you. What makes you interested in judging? By giving you, having you show off to other people, that doesn't motivate you. It motivates some people, and that's fine. Your motivations, even though they may be personal in nature, they're not necessarily negative, even though being like, I want to show off to other people, that sounds pretty bad, because it sounds very selfish, but that's okay as long as you're willing to accept feedback to become a better judge. And so you want to use that with your people. You want to figure out what they're doing, why they're doing this, and then you can work with them to make them a great judge. Yes?
What the motivation is, they just want the shiny toys.
That's fine in my book. So,
okay.
Some people are like, that's not great. However, if, let's say, I just want the shiny toys, I just want the judge comp, and this is another job for me, if I don't do well at my job, I'm not going to get staffed for events, and so I'm not going to get exemplar recs. I can go to conferences and get foils that way, but I'm not going to get staffed for events, I'm not going to get money that way. If I'm willing to listen to feedback, and I improve, and I'm a great judge, and I'm motivated solely by profit, but you're a great judge, 100% fine in my book. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool.
Exemplary behavior, exemplary no matter what.
Yeah. So, learning styles. So, people learn in different ways. Some people learn from lectures, like this, where I talk at you for an hour. Other people don't learn as well that way. Some people like pretty pictures of magic cards, which is why they're here. Even though they're not like super relevant, but you're like, that's a really good land. I don't understand what it has to do with learning. But Krug like pictures, so pictures. Other people learn through experience. If you put the cards in front of them and say, so we have a rancor and a daybreak coronet on this guy, and we disenchant the rancor, what happens with the daybreak coronet? Some people, when I just said that to you, were like, what the hell is any of this?
I've got 12 and what is this?
Right. If the cards were in front of you, you'd be like, you'd be able to read the cards, you'd be able to understand them, move them around, and figure out what's going on. Yes.
So you have 4 ways of like learning.
Yeah.
But when it comes to testing requirements, there's only one.
Yes.
How do you get around that? Like people who just can't take tests. Like I mean, I don't really understand those people. Like I don't understand how their mind works. But I do exceptionally well at tests. But like how do you get around that when that's our current requirement, other than just running them through the gambit 20 times?
Krug, do you
Why's
mind?
everybody looking at me?
I don't know why people are looking at you.
I'm horrible at picking tests, and a lot of it has to do with the stress of high impact situation. You know what's at stake, you know what you want. I'm passionate about this program, and I was trying level 2. So through my process, we started going through a bunch of situations where we're trying to figure out the best way to let me hold this information. My mentors actually did what they could and purchased the cards for me during events with their own credit to actually make sure I had the physical cards in front of me. Because I'm in the environment of judging, my mind's in the zone, and now I have these scenarios in front of me in physical cards. And it actually turned out being the best way to get me to handle the test. Printed out, cards in front of me, and them reading it to me as if they were players. Hey judge, we got this going on. You got to work with your players the best way you can to figure your candidates, no matter what level you're going for, to figure out the best way to help them learn and improve on their situation. Because not everyone can sit down and read this packet and say, hey, I know the answers.
My like main question was like even the multiple choice, like I'm very against that, just because like sometimes you'll read it and you're just like, this answer is just off by a little bit, like it's the most accurate but off by a little bit, and sometimes it's not right just because like a comma, because of the word and or then. But like how do you break through to those players? Like do you have to reach out to like higher level judges to start the process, or can you create your own exemptions?
So if you're going to deviate from what the program recommends, I would definitely say talk to somebody higher up in the program, probably
Reach out to RC.
RC most of the time. When you're testing for L2, you're probably going to be talking with at least one L3 to begin with. And then if they're running into a brick wall like this, they'll probably reach out to other L3s. For L1 testing, I'll get to you in a second, talk to your mentor. Be like, hey, what's up with this? And you don't have to jump immediately to print out the test, purchase every single card, and walk them through it. You can talk to them and figure out what's causing the issue, figure out what the root problem is, and figure out what it could be. For some people, they have difficulty just reading the questions and understanding them with something like dyslexia. And so for those people, it's relatively simple to just read the questions and read the answers to them. That works. And so you figure out what the root problem is, figure out a solution, probably run it by somebody higher up in the program, and continue on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You had a question? A comment?
Just a comment on that.
Yeah.
While learning is important and stuff, and the multiple choice can be off by that, Magic is a very complex game, and an interaction can be just thrown off by a simple word like then.
Yeah. Well, like my biggest problem is just like the tests are like you get those questions that are a paragraph, and it's just like the easiest way to do it is if they give you a spare piece of paper, is cover up part of it and then just compare each one. But I mean.
So we'll get to test taking strategies
Okay.
later on, because that is something that I covered. I've been through some testing myself. Recently, I like taking the tests because I'm weird like that.
Yes, you are.
Thanks, Zach. But we'll continue with this and we'll get back to testing, I promise you. So, covered lectures, covered experience, discussion. Some people like talking back and forth. That works for them. Having lectures can get dull. That's why I want you guys to ask questions, because we can engage better. You can figure out what you're thinking and ask me questions. I can answer them, and I can help walk you through. Finally, there's self-discovery, and that's essentially the opposite. I just throw questions at you and make you walk yourself. So It's often called the Socratic method. That is probably my favorite teaching method because it means I don't have to actually know the answer. I just have to get you to figure it out on your own, which is great when I don't know the answer. There are also more than just these 4 learning styles, of course, but I have plenty of space, but I don't know all of them because I'm not a teacher professionally, so I made some stuff up and it seems good. So we're going to go with that. So we have those learning styles. Now, when we figured out our student, we figured out learning styles, let's get to the tools for mentoring. I've listed 4 primary tools here. There's mystical tutor lessons, roundtable discussions, one-on-one mentoring, and local judge classes. So let's go through those one at a time. So, mystical tutor. Mystical tutor is a series of prezzies, just like this, that are online with voiceover. So they'll have text for people who like reading, cards that have examples, and audio. So if you learn best by hearing somebody tell you what's going on, you have that going for you. Mystical Tutor is highly accessible. It's available at mysticaltutor.org, covers pretty much everything. The first 40 lessons or so currently cover pretty much everything that could be on the L1 test. However, it's relatively low interaction. You're sitting in a computer screen by yourself watching these lessons. They're impersonal, and so if you have questions, you can't really be like, hey, what's going on here? Because it's a computer, and your computer doesn't understand it when you speak to it, except when you yell at it very loudly and hit it with a hammer. Then it stops doing stuff. Anyways, Mystical Tutor also works with many candidates, and it works particularly well when you don't have local candidates. So if somebody comes up to you at an open and is like, I want to be a judge, be like, go to Mystical Tutor. Part of the reason I'm doing this, full disclosures, I'm on the Mystical Tutor team, so good job me. Also, good job Crow, and I'm going to be really embarrassed if I miss somebody in the room who's on the project, but I don't think there is. Great. So, it's also a low time commitment because you say, go to Mystical Tutor, and that's your time commitment. However, it's not intended as a replacement for mentoring. It's Gather Specimens is a replacement. I don't know if you can see that tiny little text, but it's a replacement effect. Get it? I'm clever. So, it's a good starting point for candidates. It lets them figure out all sorts of things. It goes through the steps of the turn, including phasing and banding in combat. We say, phasing happens, don't worry about it ever, because it doesn't happen in real games of Magic, except sometimes in Legacy. But don't worry about that for your own. That's not real Magic. Yes, no, it is not.
Say that.
I love Judge Tower. It is probably my favorite format. It's not real Magic. Yes, it is. But use Mystical Tutor as a supplement for other teaching styles. If somebody's not understanding something in judge classes, or if somebody's not understanding something in your one-on-one presentations where you're talking to them, just be like, check out Mystical Tutor. It's an additional resource, and hopefully it's a little bit easier to comprehend than the comprehensive rules, because those are long and comprehensive. Lots of words. Yes, they are comprehensive. Speaking of which, do you have my red pen?
You literally said you were going to do that at every single event from now on, so
Yeah,
I guess I
I did.
accept that.
Good man. So, option number 2, roundtable. This is inspired by Trug again. Hey, and so something that's been more publicly available is the project that's being headed up by Chris Stratton. And the goal of that project is to get L1s to group together who are from L2, have chats, and learn from each other. This is a similar idea where you take a bunch of judge candidates, throw them in a room with somebody who can mentor them, and have them talk to each other. Sometimes you're not available to have discussions, whereas their peers are available. If you just throw a bunch of people into the chat room, they'll be able to talk and be like, hey, I ran into this weird thing at F&M last night. How do you guys think it works? And so it's super accessible because all you need is a Facebook chat group or anything where people can chat online. And most people have new phones. I'm not one of those. My phone is older than last year's.
Someone like that. Part of my motivation, a good motivation for doing this, shameless plug, we'll talk about it in our presentation next round, is essentially when a candidate is looking to become a judge, a lot of times they're only going to be an F&M, and they only see maybe the level 1 in the story. They don't actually talk to level 2. So essentially sitting a bunch of level 1s together, getting them on the path of mentorship, with these candidates for themselves. It also helps them on the path to level 2 for themselves, not only to mention the candidate making level 1 at some point during the day. So that was like one of the big motivations of getting them all together in one place.
Yeah, you have both the learning and the teaching go on by everybody. The nice thing about roundtable is that it can cover actually everything because it's people talking, and people talk about a lot of weird things. Sometimes it's related to magic. The one downside is while you can definitely control what people are talking about, it's a little bit harder to directly teach people. You can be like, hey, let's talk about turn structure today. But sometimes people might be like, actually, I had a delicious burrito for lunch. And then they talk about burritos for the rest of the afternoon. And that's less than ideal. If you're trying to teach them about magic, if you're trying to find a place for lunch, great, you've found one. It's the burrito place that they were talking about. Anyways, again, this works well with lots of candidates, and it works well with people who aren't local to you, because it's, again, online. It's a little bit more time commitment, because as the mentor, in theory, you know what's going on, and so you should be there, and if people go way off track, be like, hey, so that might not be supported at all by the rules, so let's talk about why that's the case, and look into the rules and figure that out. So, as I just said, create a group chat, moderate, but don't try to be the leader. Being the leader is fine, but the idea of it is to have candidates or L1s leading each other and working with each other. So this is a self-led program. And introduce important topics. Just be like, hey, you guys, I don't know where you guys are on state-based actions. Why don't you guys talk about that today? Hopefully they don't go off topic and talk about burritos. It's also a great tool to gauge interest and strength of your candidates. If somebody's talking regularly, they're interested. If somebody's talking regularly and they're right most of the time, they're interested and good at it. See how it works? You guys are clever. You guys are interested and good at it. I'm proud of you.
We did it.
Yay, Reddit! I mean, judges. So, what is one-on-one mentoring? This one's a bit tricky to understand, but it's when one person talks to another person.
Could you explain that a little bit more?
I'm, in fact, going to do that. So, it covers pretty much, again, anything you want, but it's a little bit easier to lead than roundtable discussions. You can be like, hey, we haven't talked about the turn structure. And then they rattle off everything, and you're like, great, we don't need to talk about the turn structure. What about triggers? And they're like, how about we don't? And you say, how about we do? And they cry a little bit, but you help them through that, and then they learn triggers. One-on-one mentoring can be difficult with multiple candidates. If you have, say, 3 or 4 or 5 candidates, spending a half hour with them or an hour with them each week can be very difficult. You can have these mentorship discussions online, but I find them to be immensely more productive when you're talking in person because you can understand, facial expressions and hand gestures, which I happen to do a lot of. Yes.
I find that this works well with like people you see at F&M.
Yes.
Just that is a natural kind of everyone comes together and you see people once a week, regular. You're always there. It's just really nicely suited for this sort of thing.
Yeah, weekly events are great because you can sit down with them and be like, hey, let's talk about this for a while. And depending on the strength of the candidate, you have short talks, which might be like, what's the turn structure, and somebody rattles it off. Or you walk through the entire description of the turn with all of its number of phases and all of its number of steps, which I'm not going to say because I know I get them wrong, and you all would mock me forever. Yeah, forever. So
there's a phase between turns where I can activate wall roots, right?
Used to be. So, if you have, say, 4 people who are interested in F&M, like, if you're having a half-hour conversation with each of them, that's, like, a good portion of your time, and it might be difficult to manage to find the time with everybody. So it can get a little bit unwieldy, and if somebody lives even an hour away, it might be a little bit difficult to find a way and find time to. I don't know what my words are. It'll be great. So it's a bit more time commitment than the other options, because you're sitting down and having conversations. You can continue these conversations online, of course, because the internet is fantastic. Is that hand just magic hand? Sure. Cool. So, meet when you can chat. Chat. Great. Figured that one out. It's a relatively simple topic, and utilizing the other tools available to you are, good idea. Use other stuff. So what happens if you have a bunch of candidates who are interested in becoming judges. A bunch of them are local. You have judge classes. They're classes. Yes,
I have a quick flavor question.
absolutely.
Why is Monastery Mentor up there? He makes little judglings.
I considered Monastery Mentor, but for some reason I didn't include it. I'm bad at magic.
Too many. Jonah also likes mostly old cards.
I don't like mostly. Although,
Almost
like,
like
if any of
mostly
you
old
have
cards.
ever cast Shahrazad, oh my god, that card is amazing to cast.
If anybody feels sad at the loss of Monastery Mentor, just come to our presentation.
Are you giving him a mentor?
Shameless. Dang. So, judge class works with many candidates, works with mostly local candidates. If you have people visiting, that can be a little bit trickier. We did have, in one of the judge classes I attended, somebody who drove every week for an hour to get to the store, to sit down for 2 hours, and then drove an hour home. So he was spending as much time driving as he was attending the lessons. Judge class is very high interaction because you have the same benefits of a round table where you have a bunch of candidates sitting down together and talking as you do, but you also are in person and you're there leading the class. You can talk back and forth. It is
Like this.
yeah, kind of like this, not usually as many people. It is usually a higher time commitment because you're spending time creating the class lessons and then spending time teaching the lessons. When I ran judge classes, they were about, I'd say 1 hour, but that was the time for the presentation, and then it was about 2 hours of silly questions that people had, oftentimes me. And then like another hour or so of Judge Tower EDH where we'd be like, hey, this weird thing's happening. You figure out what happens. I'm not going to do it. Even though it's all my cards and it should be my responsibility, I'm going to make you do it. You said you wanted to learn. That's how I teach people. I don't know if that works best for everybody, but I enjoy it. Yes?
Do you support the Rhino Sanction Judge Tower themes?
I do not.
Well,
Because
that goes a sanctionable FNM format.
It is.
Is it actually?
It is.
Everything is a sanctionable FNM format if it doesn't involve playtest cards.
Works. Can we sanction events with dexterity cards?
yes.
As long as they're real.
So, how to use judge class? For me, I had a weekly class. We had 8 presentations over the course of 2 months. We generally met some evening when most candidates were free, regular class time. This is useful because people are like, oh, I am now in a classroom setting, so they're prepared for it. If you have a roundtable chat or something like that, people are just like, oh, I'm at work, or I'm in class, or I'm playing video games and talking about magic, let me throw some words that are vaguely relevant. But if you're sitting down for a class, well, then you're sitting down for a class and you get in that mindset, and so you're hopefully able to learn a little bit better. I often use practice questions / quizzes. I changed how they worked over time. I had prezzies where I was like, here's everything you need to know about state-based action, including the one about Rasputin and the one that's not in the, the conference rules. There's one of them here. Don't worry about it. So I gave out practice questions at the end, and I started calling them quizzes, and people were like, oh, I'm going to be quiet and do this, and then hand it in and expect to get a grade. And I'm like, that's not what I wanted to do. So I was like, you guys just hear questions, figure them out, and practice questions worked a lot better, because calling them practice questions instead of quizzes made people think that they weren't quizzes, because I wasn't calling them quizzes.
Because they're not.
Yeah. Yes.
There's actually been tests about this where if you set something to revert people back into like the school mindset, they will revert to their old school mindset. There was once a group of like 30-year-old engineers that like the purpose was to get a project done, and they ended up all being quiet and doing it themselves.
That is glorious. Stories. I like that. Hey, look, stories. One of my favorite things about judge class is sometimes you have relevant stories.
Is close to color.
So, sometimes as you get more and more experience, you run into weird things happening at events. Like, hey, judge, my opponent just took an extra turn. Like, they went combat, deal damage, okay, untap. and it's like turn 3 in a draft format where there isn't take an extra turn card. What just happened? And I was like, well, why don't you just tell me what happened? And the player's like, I don't know. I kind of lost track of things. So I thought it was my turn and I untapped. I was like, I actually believe you because you seem really confused about why you're untapping your land. So play on. But stories like that stick in people's minds. And so if you attach a story to a lesson, people hopefully better remember it because they're like, oh, there's this thing about taking turns and that weird story from that weird thing that Jonah did. Similarly, I like corner cases. I don't think corner cases are a great way to teach people in general, going up to somebody and being like, hey, how does this weird, useless interaction work? That's not going to necessarily improve them as a judge. However, some corner cases, the nice thing about corner cases is that they're asking questions about very, 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 very specific things. And so if you think somebody's having trouble with something, figure out a corner case that deals with just that thing. And so the question ends up being, what is this singular interaction? Not, what is this group of interactions doing? The one that I use involves Ashnod's Altar, which says sacrifice a creature as you powerless, and a creature called Skyshroud Elf Ranger. Yes, I may have asked some of you this question previously. It taps for green. You can pay 1 colorless to add red and a white. And yes, there's a way with only those 2 permanents to cast something for red, white, and green. Not green.
Woolly fucker.
Just those.
Woolly fucker. Yeah, cast Woolly fucker.
Yeah.
Nine charm.
There you go.
I heard Ornithopter. I was like, why are you saying Ornithopter?
Woolly fucker.
That's also a real magic card. Anyways, that question deals with activating mana abilities during the activate mana abilities portion of activating abilities. And so you end up going down a couple layers like turtles to activate mana abilities inside mana abilities inside mana abilities. And it works, and it's a very weird corner case, and it's never going to happen in a real game of Magic unless somebody's trying explicitly to do just that. And they're not going to unless they're actually crazy. Hi.
Have you done that?
I haven't, but I want to.
Why would you play Skyshroud Elf?
So I can cast Naya Charm with just Ashnod's Altar as that.
Okay, how are you getting into play with no lens?
I'll sacrifice them to something. Anyways, that's not the point here. And we're running a little bit short on time, so we're going to move on unless people have questions. Corner cases sometimes useful. So, we've covered the tools, we've covered the student. Let's get to the making the judge part of this. Step 1, teach all the things. So, utilize multiple teaching styles. Use these teaching styles. I believe you guys might cover some more teaching styles. Use those. Call in assists. Feel free to be like, hey, you know stuff. I'm picking on Krug again because I've already picked on him. And I called in an assist with Krug because I know that Krug had experience with questions that you had. And so there we go. If you know somebody's particularly good at state-based actions, call them in. If you have a friend who's great at understanding layers, great. When I was teaching judge classes, I was lucky enough to be living near Eric Levine, who's run more regular events than I can count. And so I was like, hey, Eric Levine, teach this lesson for me, because he knows that material very well. And so he came in and helped me out with the lesson, and it was better for my students because they had Eric teaching who has a lot more experience than I do. Improvise, make stuff up. I have like 5 pages of notes, and like I read the first page, and then I kind of forgot to turn pages over, so I've been reading the same stuff and making it up as I go along. Somehow it works out, usually, I hope. So, teach. Keep on teaching. This is the certified make a judge part of it. They have to be at 2 sanctioned events. A lot of times this can get passed over. I think it's a very, very important part of the testing process. You want to see how they interact in a live environment. You want to see how they interact with players. You want to see how they interact with rulings that they're not sure how to deal with. And to do that, you should be there. I've seen sometimes you're not available to make it to the event where they're judging, So just ask a store employee or player, somebody that you know and trust, to watch them, see what they're doing, take notes, and give you feedback. If you're there and the event isn't, say, 8 people, consider not playing. You're definitely allowed to play because it's a Magic event and you're not judging and it's regular, so you're probably okay with it, unless for some reason you've shown play Magic. But if you're playing Magic, you're going to be shockingly focused on the game of Magic and not what the judge is doing. If you're running events, have them assist you. Sometimes pre-releases don't need 2 judges, but hey, if you have 30 players, it can't hurt to have somebody else around. You can have them answer the calls and you do the silly technical stuff with Word before it breaks, because they don't need to deal with that just yet. And when you're at those events, walk them through things that they haven't considered. Sure, while you're teaching, you may have covered these, but a lot of judge candidates I've found, when they first approach judging, are like, okay, what are the rules? Now I know the rules, great, I know how to judge. I'm like, well, first we fire up Word. They're like, what's that? And I'm like, oh boy, are you in for a treat. They're like, oh, it's a program made by wizards. I'm like, yeah.
What is Word?
Wizards of Dark Reporter?
I've never used it. I was kept joking. That's the question you get.
Yeah.
I've never used Word. That's serious.
So,
I buy it.
sometimes you'll have to tell them how to get the penalties tab back by going to add more judges, because that's how that works. More importantly, and relevantly to some people on the current build of Word, sometimes if you narrow down the local players down to just 1 player, and you add them, you in fact add all of your local players, which may be more than the number of players you intended to enroll. Does anybody here have any experience with that? Or complain about it on Slack sometimes regularly?
The biggest headache is players with multiple BCI numbers.
Oh, yeah. Also, opening announcements. People don't really think about those before you're like, so what are your opening announcements? And they're like, huh? And you're like, well, maybe you should introduce, I don't know, anything. And they're like what? The event, yourself, that sort of thing. Also, a lot of people haven't worked with a TO. Some TOs can be scary. That's not the image that they try to present. But this is the guy who runs the store where you've been playing for years, or you just moved in and you don't even know the guy. He runs a business and you don't know him, and he's like, I need to save money. You're like, I don't want to interact with you. It's the mentor. You can be like, hey, the TO's not actually a fire-breathing dragon. He's a human being. Not sure if he breathes fire. Haven't seen it. But you make them interact, show them that TOs are in fact mostly human, get them started. Test preparation. This is relevant to you. So supply your own questions. Be like, hey, here's questions that you came up with. Give them practice tests, because that's easy. You just go to Judge Center, which is another program made by wizards, I think, or was it Judges?
Judge Center is
Judge Center's
Judge Apps is judges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
No, we
Judge
know
Center
that.
was made by judges a long time ago, but we blame wizards now.
Yep.
But there are practice tests there. When they take those tests, evaluate them for areas of improvement. One thing that I did when I was testing for L2 was I took a number of tests. I don't know how many, it was probably too many. And then I evaluated them. Where did I go wrong? A third of the questions I got wrong because I didn't read the card, or the question, or the answers. I just missed something. Like, oh, Liliana says, top of library not hand. That's an important distinction for a tutor, because you can't cast that card.
Funny story about tests. When I was testing for L2, I took so many hard practice tests that Judge Center was like, you, stop taking hard practice tests. We don't have any new questions to give you.
Yeah. So,
That's the hard
take
practices are.
a reasonable number of tests, a couple tests. So 1/3, I just did not read. 1/3 were a variety of things, covering all sorts of things, and 1/3 of them were about triggers. Shockingly, I was like, maybe I should figure out how triggers work. And so I did that. Also, when you're preparing somebody for tests, talk about things that people often forget, like the two-headed giant rules. You start with, you get a free mulligan because it's a multiplayer game, but you don't get to draw on the first turn because it's not a multiplayer game, and I don't understand that, but that's what
It's a
the rules say.
multiplayer game with 2 players.
Yeah.
Special sprite rule too.
Also, talk about testing strategies. One thing that I strongly suggest is when you're taking a test, before you read the answers, write down the answer, and then compare what you said to the answers. You're not going to use the exact same language that the test uses, but it'd probably be similar. Again, you can also just go through the test, write down on a sheet of paper the answer, like A, B, whatever, then go through a second time, mark it down on the actual test and compare. If you get different answers when you answer the same question, that's probably a sign that you want to think about that question a little bit more. Offering dice or basic lands to use as tokens can be a starting place. Just be like, just use these to interpret as cards. These swamps can be zombie tokens, or they can be lightning bolts on the stack. They can be whatever you desire. They're wonderful swamps. So testing strategies like that are available. Then we get to the interview. Check for a pulse. If you've been working with somebody for this long, hopefully you think that they're a good judge. Because if you thought otherwise, you might have wanted to talk to them beforehand and be like, hey, here's where we can improve. One judge that I know says when you're doing the L2 interview, check for a pulse and make sure they're not a jerk. You can do that, but I like to have a little bit more of that. Figure out what they can do for their local community. What events are needed for them, like PPTQs or IQs, GBTs. Tell them about that. Tell them what the judge community can do for them. They're like, hey, all of these judges around the world, these guys know, or these people know things, they know people, and they can give you connections. If you need a job on the other side of the country, you go over there, talk to the judges, hey, judge community is helping you out. And integrate them into the community. So Slack channels, judge apps, Facebook groups, that sort of thing. I know I'm rushing a little bit here, but I'm running short on time. So we've taught them stuff, we figured out stuff about ourselves, we've had them run their events, tested them, they've hopefully passed at this point, we've given them the interview, we're pretty much done. But wait, there's more.
Write the review.
Write the review, but also continue to work with your candidate. If you certify somebody and they're like, all right, see ya, I'm done, that's not going to be great for them. Do you remember your first event? My first event, I almost scared a player away from our store forever, and we need to give him a free draft to get him to even come back to our store. Yeah, it wasn't that great. I tell you the story, but I have pretty much no time left. So just remember, work with your candidates after you certify them. Hang out with them, chat with them, be available on Facebook or Slack. Talk to them at your stores, and that's pretty much it. If you have questions, I'm available afterwards.
Can you just talk for a second about what to do with candidates that fail their test?